Okay, meeting is being recorded now. I think that's what the red dot says. Okay, so let's get started. Welcome everybody. I can see how many have we got? 10 participants. That is very good. I don't think we are likely to get more than that, so it's good to get started now. I'm going to focus on assessment, mainly assessment 1, and have a quick word on assessments 2 and 3, but mainly focus on 1. And then after that, I'll open up for you to make comments or ask questions, because it's good to have the forum also as an opportunity to learn from each other. So let's get started. Unless anyone has got any quick question before we start. Like everyone can hear. If everyone can hear me well, if there is anything you are not accessing, let us know. Otherwise, yeah, we get started. Okay, the assessment is in 2 parts. Or 2 S's we have called it, but it's important also to treat it as one assessment, and therefore just one reference list. So you don't need to put a reference list after the first one. Just keep going, but it's good to introduce each of the items separately, and have also a brief conclusion in each. So it asks you to critically discuss Carrero-Versac's 3 generations of human rights framework, and discuss the limitations and implications for social work or social welfare. And the second part asks you to look at the human rights-based approach in social work, and discuss the meaning of that and how it can be applied to social work or social welfare. Now, when you read a question like that, it's good to look at it carefully, look at what are the main parts of it. When somebody asks you to have a critical approach, or to critically look at something, it's asking you to have a very careful and systematic assessment of the issue. Check how trustworthy it is, what's the value, and what makes it particularly relevant in the context that we are discussing it. So the word critical then informs you that you need to look carefully at all the different arguments that different authors who have looked at the framework presented by Carrero-Versac in discussing the 3 generations. The other point to bear in mind is the word discuss. When you see the word discuss, it's very different from when someone asks you to outline. Discuss is inviting you to present a detailed examination or a consideration, give different point of views. So when you combine then discuss and critical, then you can see that it's asking you to look at the different ways of understanding the particular issue, in this case the framework, what's good about it, where does it fall short, what do you agree with, what do you find a problem with it. So it's really asking you to have a very open-minded approach to it, rather than a dogmatic approach that just sees all the good parts of it, or the bad parts of it. So have that balanced discussion about it. In terms of the content itself of the Karol Vasak's framework, if it tells you that the three-generation framework, that the division of human rights into three generations was initially proposed in 1979 by the Czech jurist Karel Vasak, who was at the International Institute of Human Rights in Strasbourg. Now, one of the problems I find when students discuss it is they forget to mention that he was actually looking at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. He wasn't just talking out of nowhere. He was doing a critical review or a critical look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And if you miss that very critical point, then you miss your discussion becomes very hard to follow. Some people try to discuss it, bring up the history, enlightenment for the first generation and so on. But if you are not linking that to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it can appear like you are not actually sure, or you don't know where exactly Karel Vasak got his ideas from. So that is a very important point which a number of students tend to miss. Okay, another tip to remember there is that when you are discussing it, give an outline and explain clearly all the different points about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as presented and analyzed by Karel Vasak. That is saying these particular articles are the ones that refer to the first generation, and these articles are the ones that refer to the second generation, and so forth. And also mentioned also about the covenants, how the International Covenant on civil and political rights is linked to that first generation. The second point there is that it's important for you, especially if you want to get into the higher grades, to have a critical look at the different views that different authors have, what the different people that have commented on the framework have said. Some have praised it and seen it as very good in helping us to understand the human rights, and others feel that it has just made the situation more complicated by introducing, say, for example, a term like generation, which people might misunderstand. So look at the implications then and the limitations, particularly to social work. So how social work fits in with the different generations, how the kind of social work that we do can relate to different generations. Okay, after that you'll be ready to move on to part B. Again, with the part B, it's asking you to apply the human rights-based approach to social work. It's always good to start with an explanation. What does human rights-based approach mean? And it emphasizes the protection of and promotion of human rights, and is recognized by United Nations and promoted. And a lot of people do refer to the information that's available from the United Nations which tells you that the main human rights principles that are considered in human rights-based approach are human dignity, non-discrimination, transparency, accountability, and participation. And so that those are the, and that's not everything, but those are some of the main ones. My only problem with the way the students use it is they tend to focus too much on what's available on the UN sites and in some of the literature, because a lot of it is to do with the development studies and development aid, particularly in the third world countries, which is good, but if you focus too much on that, you might lose the focus on social work. So it's very important to be selective in the material that you are accessing. So if the material is about development aid, it's good, but it's not focusing on social work. So just be careful when you are selecting. Just because something has said human rights based approach, it doesn't mean that it's directly relevant to what you are doing. And that's probably what I'm explaining in this slide. Some people sometimes say they can't find the information, they don't quite understand it, and they get confused with far too much information. The best thing is to start off with IFE, and IFE on page 37 to 41, and also again on 215 to 25 to 225. Sorry, he does explain it very, very clearly how it applies or can be applied in social work. What is also helpful is to mention how you can use it in your practice and how it has how you have used it in the past, or if you are not if you are not working at the moment in a field where you can apply it, how you are going to apply it in future. Let me pause and look at some of the comments we have. Okay, Jasmine says trying to get this into 1,000 watts is going to be tough. Yes, it can be, and actually I did reduce this assessment a bit to make it manageable for us as well in marking, trying to have a quick turnaround. But the trick is to summarize your information rather than to put down everything. Writing fewer words can actually take longer because you need to condense the information, but it is actually good. It makes it much better to read rather than when a point looks like it's labored. When you can summarize it, it's very good. Think of how you write an abstract and how you can summarize a lot of information into a few words. Okay, Hannah says, when you said we should realize, we should relate it to real life examples for the limitation. If you're talking about the framework, yes, human rights have got their limitations, but mainly with the framework, I'm talking about the way it's presented, the limitations, like what I mentioned before about the generations, talking about generations, and people then assuming that it's saying that maybe the second generation, like with the computers, that's better than the first generation, which is not really what is meant. And the other limitation is something like breaking up the human rights into different sections, whereas on the other hand, the people who drafted human rights told us that they should be indivisible. So how do you divide something that is indivisible? Those are some of the arguments and limitations that you can talk about. Monique says, I would like to just quickly go over what you mentioned with the Vassak's model and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Okay, what I was saying there, Monique, is that the framework that Vassak presented was based on his understanding on human rights that are presented in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And when he looked at it, he said that it seemed to him like the civil and political rights that are, in the majority of the rights, they seemed to relate to, which we call the first generation, they seemed to relate to the earlier understanding of the European philosophies about the, what they call the natural rights. And when he looked at the second generation, the second lot of rights that are there in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, they seem to relate to the social democratic movements of, say, of the 60s and 70s. And when he looked at the last one or two articles, they seemed to relate more to communal rights, the rights that we generally have as communities. So that's how he presented it, and he also talked about it as seeming to relate to the three colors of the French flag. But yeah, so those are the sort of different ways of looking at it. But the point I was laboring on there is to understand that is where that's what he was looking at. He was looking at that Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So it's limitation in the framework rather than the limitations to how social work and these generations. Yes, yeah, it's the limitations of the framework which obviously can affect how it's understood and how it's applied. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Another tip that I wanted to mention here is it's just in terms of application of the human rights-based approach. It can be it's very flexible. It can be applied to all the different areas of social work. So in this case, you can use it, say, in micro practice. So micro practice is where you are talking about clinical practice. But even in clinical practice, you can promote human rights in terms of the way you interact with the clients. So your knowledge of human rights, all those things that we have talked about, non-discriminatory, looking at the rights of the client and their rights to self-determination. So you can look at them instead of just looking at the pathology of the presenting issues. Look at how you can empower your client. Okay, and in macro practice, if you're applying the human rights based approach in macro practice, IF does talk a lot about how you can use it in community development, in advocacy for communities, advocacy for the environment, probably research as well. He also mentions that, or Ron perhaps more than I've mentioned, that can also be used in early intervention work, and also addressing the problems that broadly face communities, especially for social workers who are working in community development, in the policy area, and in research area. So the argument here is that even in those areas, you can also apply this human rights-based approach. So let me see if there are any comments. Hannah, that's what I'm wondering. Are we talking about the limitations of generations or the limitations of social work? Yeah, I think I mentioned, I clarified that. It's more about the limitations of the framework as presented. Okay, I think the human rights based approach is and the framework is clear. I'll move on to some further tips that I would like to pass on for the time that we have, so that I can also leave more time for discussion. Referencing. Always remember you have to use APA throughout. For subjects at this level, level 4 and above, the minimum references is 8 for both. That covers both short essays. Always good to remember that we are talking about minimum. There is no maximum. The more obviously you can use, the better, and to encourage that, I don't count the references. And it's always good where you can, when you are making a point, when you can have different sources, it helps to show that that's not just a point of view of one author like Ife. So if you mention something, Ife has said it, Androv has also said it, Ronka has also said the same thing. If you can give points that you can support with multiple others like that, it helps a lot. And it's a sort of thing that is good in terms of what someone was saying, that you are having to condense so much information. When you have made a point and given several references like that, the point is already made, it's clear, you don't need to go into too many details. It's already, you have already shown that this is a solid fact that is widely supported. The other tip for me is to avoid direct quotes. That's a trap that people who have not been writing a lot get into. The thing is, when you have a very nice direct quote, it is telling me about the original author. You have quoted Ife, and Ife has made something very clear, but I still don't know whether it's clear to you. So if you can write it in your own words, read what Ife has said, then write it in your own words. What you call paraphrasing, that is much better. However, with things like the articles, things like definitions, direct quotes work better, because you don't want to mess up with the definition. The other issue that people normally ask is about whether they need to write in the first person or not. I think first person is acceptable, but it seems to me like this, with this particular this first assessment, a third person might be better. But I'm open to either. You'll find that probably in the third assessment, writing in the first person is going to be more applicable. Let's have a quick look at comments. Monique, the marking for Part B section says that theoretical meaning of human rights-based approach to social work. I'm a bit confused about this. the theoretical meaning, it's really just defining what it means. Before you tell me how you can apply it, give me a definition. This is what a human rights-based approach means, and then from there you can go and talk a bit more about how it's applied in practice. So that's all that means. Okay. Monique, okay, I get it now. Okay, all right. I'm glad. If you don't achieve anything, if you have achieved that, Monique, that's very good. Okay. This is just something I was thinking about the other day. It's about using secular resources. When I talk about secular resources, is sometimes when I'm reading, I find people will say Ife has written this, but he's quoting Ronca. Ideally, you should go and look for the Ronca source and use that, because you don't know how Ife has interpreted it. Because when we're reading what somebody has said, obviously they give it their own twist. So if you can use the original source, it's much better. However, there are times when you can't find that original source, and therefore you have to say Jones, cited Mark being the original author. In the past, we have tended to give that date of the original author, but APA is saying these days you don't need to do that. Just use the author that you have read. So if it is Ife, even though you are saying Ife has cited Ronca, just give the date of Ife, and in the references you are only going to have Ife. You don't need to see Ronca. The website that has got more details for that is there. So if that is something you want to follow up, that is there, and you can read that in more detail. Okay. All right. Okay. So before I go to assessment 2, anyone with any question? Okay, I'll go to the discussion of assessment 2, and if you have a question on what we have discussed so far, you can put it down. Assessment 2 is very straightforward. You are given 5 topics to write about. Write 500 words and then submit. What you post, you then submit. You submit via ISTS. Now, some people sometimes forget to submit. They submit online, and others can read it, but they forget that they also have to submit it via ISTS. So I don't mark what you have on the post. I mark what you submit via ISTS. So that's very important to remember. Every year I have 1 or 2 students who forget to do that, so don't be the one. So you talk about what's the most important current human rights issues, what you think are the most effective human rights instrumentalities to address them, and what you think are the most effective actions that social workers or social welfare can take. So this is like a small, very small actually, research project. So the topics that I've given you are not topics that are covered in the modules. So that's why I'm saying you have to do your own research. There are times when people look at that and say, okay, they are good, but I have something else that I would really like to talk about that is not covered in that. In that situation, give me a call or send me an email. Let's discuss it and see if it is something that I can accept that you work on. So, but if you do something that's not on the list, and you have not contacted me, then I'm not going to accept it. So it's very, very important when you are going to discuss something that is not listed, that you contact me and clear it with me that it is acceptable. The other thing that confuses people is when they need to submit it. In the schedule, I have got the times. I haven't probably got the time in the assessment item itself, and that might be where the confusion comes in. But if you check the schedule, the dates are there. It tells you you can't submit after a certain date, and that is to make sure that you submit it at a time that others can read as well. If you're going to submit later than that for special circumstances, then you need to talk to me about it. One of the questions that I often get is what sort of things can we do? Sorry, I've jumped to assessment 3. In assessment 3, and we are going to have time to discuss assessment 3 at a later date, but for people who are already thinking about it, I just wanted to flag the fact that there are some actions that people have taken in the past, and as I said, this particular assessment is something that you need to think about right from the start. If you leave it until you are until the time that it's due, maybe in a couple of weeks, you are going to get yourself in trouble. That's something that you need to be doing throughout the session. So the sort of things that people have done have included signing some petitions, writing to their local member, joining in some human rights related demonstrations, signing some online petitions, starting a website, organizing some function to raise an awareness about a human rights issue. It can be something like say harassment, sexual harassment at work. You identify that as an issue, and it's not part of your job, but it is something that you think is important. Or something else that people do is organize a morning tea to raise awareness about mental health, particularly the human rights related to mental health issues, sorry, and how the stigma that is attached to that, and trying to break that stigma. And you want to raise that awareness at work or in your community. Again, that is something that the sort of thing that people have done. Some computer savvy young people have also started a social media website or a social media campaign. So these are just examples. There is really no limit. For me, the most important thing is how you explain the effectiveness of what you have done, the limitations of it in terms of advancing human rights, and also a suggestion of what you can do in future. You can say, I did this because of time and resource limitations. If I had more time and more resources, this is probably what I can do. So sometimes people can do something that is particularly wonderful, but they're not able to explain it well enough or critical enough. And somebody who has done a very, very small thing, but is able to explain it more carefully, or more in more detail, critique it and explain how effective or ineffective it was. What else they could have done if they had the enough, say, resources like time and money, what they could have done better. They can actually end up getting more scoring more marks than someone who has actually done something more substantial, but they have not been able to analyze it as well. So it's very important to have that balance. So that's what I have prepared for you. I just wanted to make those few remarks before opening it to discussion. Let me see what we have. Monique, okay, I get it now. You have this memories. Okay. Hanifa, thanks for this secret source tip. Always wonder about this. Oh, good, very good. I'm happy to hear that was relevant. And also, you can actually talk. Those who have got who have got their microphones on, you can talk and we can hear you, and that is quicker than typing. Slide 15. Okay. Yes, that's the online post.
Just wondering if you can hear me.
So, have you found this? Have you found this session useful? Is it something you don't want us to do with the assessment 3 as well? Okay, let me see. Hannah was saying, I'm a little concerned that I have done first question to assignment 1 incorrectly. Am I able to email you? You can, but you can also try to rectify it with what I have said, and maybe you can email after that. So yeah, up to you. What you think is going to be helpful? I'm happy to have a quick look. Can you hear me talking? Trying to use my audio. No, we can't hear you. Uh,
Can you hear me now?
Maybe, and I have given, yeah, I have given rights to audios because we had people talking before.
Can you hear me now?
And don't worry about the caps, that's fine by me. What's the date that we need to have the online post done by? Um, I haven't got that open here, but if you go to the subject outline in the schedule, I have got it there, and I can send an email reminder yeah, to everyone. So because I know what I say, that it's not
How
it
about
doesn't
now?
appear directly in the assessment item, so people sometimes miss it. So that's good to remind me. I'll say that. All right. Yes. Yeah. We organize that. The second online class. Oh, you can hear very slightly. We did check. We did have a test before, and I got the information that people could
Can you hear
hear
me now?
me. So the problem could be at your end. So maybe see if you can increase the volume.
Yeah, I can hear
Or
you.
was
Can
it
you hear
the?
me?
Sorry, maybe that was not about me. Okay, yeah. So maybe it's
I
not
think it's
me.
definitely maybe.
It's another. Is there other participant who could not be heard? Okay. Okay. Any other questions regarding the assessment or the topics that you have covered so far? I think okay. I think everyone can hear, but not you, Dungi. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure why. Let me see. I just pick a volume. I've adjusted my speaker volume to the highest possible. Can someone else try to speak, and we so I can see if the problem is at my end then? Yes, I will say I'll post the slides as well for you. I've also tried to record this, and I'll try to set the recording. My record of the recordings is not great. I have had times when I have lost everything, but I think today it has recorded. I see the red thing there, which probably means it has recorded. Yeah, sometimes I have lost everything, and students have not been particularly happy with me. But the slides definitely, I'll be setting them. I see that for assignment 1, it mentioned that the reference need to be peer-reviewed articles. Is this what we need to focus on? Look, the peer-reviewed references are always preferred for academic work, but that mainly means that you should have most of your references like that, rather than say Wikipedia or other encyclopedias. That because we sometimes can't know how reliable the information is. But say if you have say if you have 8 references and at least 5 of them are from peer-reviewed sources, I can live with the other 3. It just means the majority do need to be peer-reviewed, rather than saying only the information from peer-reviewed sources is going to be accepted. So that's a good question. Rachel, is there one specific text by Carol Vasak we need to base assignment on, or is it just a theory in general? No, there is no textbook that that he has written about it that I'm aware of. Maybe there is an article, but not a book. But because it's been around since 1979, there's a lot of information about it scattered in various books. So you don't necessarily need to read about it. Ronka and Wellman are some of the sources that have discussed it in detail, but there is no single book that I can say this is the one, this is the magic bullet. Sorry. Natasha, there has been this has been great help. Now just about getting that first assignment done. Yes, it's one thing having all these ideas floating around in my head, and another to write them down as a coherent and relevant way. That's interesting you should say that, because I was talking to a student the other day and I was saying be careful about just reading and not really going to the next step of writing. And the trick is to take very good notes when you read, and then probably at some point, deciding probably not to read anymore if you feel like you have read enough, and then start writing. There's no other trick to it than just writing. Rather than just keep reading and reading and reading. It has made me very sad sometimes when I have some very, very good, brilliant students who can articulate all these issues very well, but they get some kind of a block, like a writer's block, I think it's called, where they're just afraid like they might make a mistake if they write. It's better to write, better to make the mistake writing than make a mistake of not writing. I think that's probably the only wise words that I think I can convey now. Okay, let's say, so it's okay to use secular text when referring to Karl Vasak. Yes. Yeah, definitely. And Monique, I was going to ask about what you said about the main mistake students make. Vasak's model, I'm concerned. Right, I didn't want to scare you. What I was saying is that the most common mistake that students make is not making a reference to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and making it very clear that these generations that Vasak has talked about relate to the articles in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. People talk about it, and if I read the whole thing and there's no mention of that or the covenants, then I realize that this person hasn't quite got it. They're writing about the generations, but they haven't got where these generations came from. Because it's not just a history. There is history, yes, but it's also an analysis on the articles of human rights that appear in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So what Vasak was trying to do is to help people make sense of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So that's the point I was making. Yes, Natasha, just right. Actually, it's easy to fix and correct what you have written. You can delete some parts, rewrite some parts. I have found that sometimes even when I have written something and I have then accidentally lost it, just because I got into that process of writing, even if I have to write it again, I find it easy because all the information is in my mind. And the other thing, of course, is having notes. If you have got notes, then you don't forget, oh, where did I read that? You have got your notes, you can always go back to the notes. So taking good notes rather than just reading like you are reading a novel for pleasure, taking notes is absolutely critical for academic work. I appreciate that there are people who have already written and they might have to revise, but I think that is still helpful. You are not going to rewrite everything, but you make some adjustments, and that is only going to be helpful to you. So yes, I'm sorry about making you work twice, but it's important that that you get it right. Jasmine, please confirm Part A assessment. One needs to discuss limitations of the generations of rights on social work practice. No, we say that the limitations are not on the social work practice. The limitations are on the framework, how the human rights are presented in the framework. And we say things like talking about generations. That's one kind of limitation that you can discuss. You can discuss another limitation, like something like dividing the rights, which are on the other hand are supposed to be indivisible and interrelated. But when you try to split them into generations, it's easy then for people to sort of think of them in isolation, whereas they are supposed to work together as a whole that is indivisible, and it's interrelated and interlinked. So yeah, so that's what you focus on. Checking if there are other comments. Okay, thanks, Jasmine. Okay, I'm just pausing to see if there are any comments that I might have missed. Oh, thanks, Jasmine. I'm glad you have found it useful. Anyone here want to body to discuss? Yeah, I'll leave you to organize that. It's always good to buddy up and work and discuss, but be careful also in that you don't end up submitting the same assessment, because then I'm going to penalize you very badly. So you can discuss together, share the points, but don't send me the same. Don't copy each other's work. That's what I'm trying to say, without trying to alarm you. But I have seen sometimes when people have submitted the same work and they both get in trouble. But that doesn't mean that people should not work together. I actually encourage people to work together, share ideas, share point of view, look at what, I think it's even possible to proofread each other's work when it is complete, but only if you have a mutual agreement that you're not going to copy each other's work. So that's a little bit tricky. So I think the better thing is to share the discussion. That's very important, and something that really to be encouraged, because it's very easy to forget some point. But when you talk to someone, say, oh yeah, that's an important point. Can discuss, like, how are you applying the human rights based approach? We're applying it this way at my work. Oh yes, that reminds me of what we are doing, and I think that's something that relates to what we are doing. So it's important, really helpful to share. All right. Okay. So we are it's almost time to finish, unless somebody has got any quick. Sorry, but I must go. Lunch time is up. Yeah, yes, yeah. I think we have finished. Everyone, I'll just hang around for any question, but otherwise, we have finished. Yeah, thank you too, Monique. Thanks very much for joining. And we had a very good number. I think at some point we were 16, which is a very good turnout, given that people are at work. And I really appreciate your comments. Even if you're just saying that you found it useful, it's really encouraging for me to keep doing this and to know that it's helping someone. Yeah, very glad that you are able to join too, Rachel. Thanks. Now the next challenge for me is to make sure that I get the recording and share it with you and with those who are not able to attend. Yeah, when people don't attend, what they miss is it's that interaction. They have to read it second hand, and they don't get the opportunity to ask the question. So that's the unfortunate drawback. But I appreciate that not everybody can be able to get the time free. If you could also email us regarding the due date for the assessments too. Yes, yeah. I promise I'll do that. I'll make sure. Yeah, thanks very much, and have a good weekend, everyone too. Yeah, I'll make sure that I don't forget that. And hopefully next time it's actually very hard in terms of putting it in the assessment because it's a valuable date. The assessment doesn't sort of seem to accept it. So I have to think more creatively about it next time if I'm teaching the same subject. Okay, goodbye everyone. I'm typing now. I hope to see you for the second class soon. Not soon, but soon.